Welcome, Reid. Thank you. I don't think you need an introduction, but for the few people who don't know you, co-founder of LinkedIn, currently co-founder of Inflection AI, and just an amazing human being who's been very involved in building tech. Probably one of the most influential and successful investors is Silicon Valley. Also on the board of Microsoft. You have an inside look at a lot of different things. One of the first investors in OpenAI, and also just a really decent, good human being. So we're here to have a chat with Reid. So thank you so much for joining us, Reid.
My pleasure and honor.
All right. My first question is, when I first got connected with you, I used to listen to interviews from you, and you would talk about entrepreneurism and product market fit and all these kind of powerful things about starting a business. And then years later, you started talking about friendship and the power of human connection and kind of what this is like. And most recently, when I've listened to interviews by you, you're talking about like love and spirituality. So I'm wondering, like, what happened and how much ayahuasca was involved?
Well, no ayahuasca, although maybe a certain amount of Kool-Aid.
Okay, so mushrooms?
No,
I'm joking.
No.
So, but something seems to be, love and spirituality are now part of your area, and I'm curious.
So really what it came about, I think, because it's a very interesting question. So when people ask me what I was planning to do when I was an undergraduate, it was to write a book on friendship. And it's partially because if you go to a bookstore and you ask for the relationship section, there's this whole section. And you ask for the friendship section, and they're like, well, maybe we have a book or two. We have to kind of look around and see if it's here. And yet, I think that friendship as an important part of our lives, as relationships. Relationships obviously super important, but the notion of how we lead meaningful lives, how we become wiser people. And I'm still planning on doing that. And then part of it is I think some of my friends started outing me about thinking about friendship, and so started asking me questions, and so I started answering the questions, and then that's what evolved to it. Now, I've always thought that being meaningful in your life, which you can describe also as spiritual, is very important. And to some degree, the religious impulse to a sense of higher purpose is one of the things that is very special about human beings. I frequently disagree with most structured religions, but that impulse to say we lead meaningful lives and it's part of why we are here and part of how we try to make the world better by our presence and other people better by our presence, that's, I think, super important. And so I think, just like your opening question, I get asked about it more, so I talk about it more.
Got it. Beautiful.
Yes.
And so as we look at AI, because we're at the Wisdom and AI Summit, there's people who look at it and kind of mainly see all the problems it could bring about in terms of killer robots and manipulation, and there's some serious dangers. And there's a lot of other people who look at it and be like, yeah, but look at all this amazing stuff that's going to happen. Where do you sit in that between those two? And how do you see AI emerging in our culture?
So I'm generally speaking, one of the things I describe myself as a techno-optimist, not a techno-utopian. And what that means is we can create much better lives through technology. Matter of fact, one of the things that, in the book Impromptu and the commencement speech that I gave at Bologna last month and so where they say, to some degree, we're better described as Homo techne than Homo sapiens because we evolve ourselves through technology. This is a portion of technology. This is technology, right? Not just this and this and that and the other thing. They're all parts of technology about how we evolve ourselves as human beings. And of course, when we get new technology, where it's kind of somewhat alienated, and then it gets integrated into who we are. And I think that the AI is a massive tech wave, which is larger than the internet, mobile, and cloud because it amplifies all of them. And so therefore has a much more elevated concern profile. But just like all these others, I think the right thing to do is say, where should we build towards? What should we be doing? How do we get to a place that is the more human place as a function of this? So like with Impromptu, it's amplification intelligence, not artificial intelligence. Doesn't mean that the risks and concerns aren't worth paying attention to. That's the steering towards optimism, not just inevitably utopianism. But I tend to feel somewhat strongly that one of the disservices to humanity that most of the critics are doing is that by focusing entirely on the negatives and the criticism, you can't say, let's not invent a technology. That doesn't happen within the human sphere. It's kind of a question of how do you steer it, what do you do? And if for example, if I came to you and said, we're going to create these 2-ton metal devices that people can get drunk and run over other people and occasionally use them as weapons and we should stop that, right? It's like no cars, and we have a problem. So the question is to say, look, what's the universe we should be steering towards? What should we be doing? What should we be seeking now? And how do we do that? And by fear-mongering, you generally speaking create more anxiety and fear and revulsion. And it doesn't mean you don't have concern, but you say, articulate them together. What is the thing we should be trying to seek to achieve? And what are the things we navigate around, and why is that? And then there's a long list of the navigation because of new technology, and then go, okay, which of the long list, which are the ones that are most important to do soon, and which ones can we do iteratively as we go?
So help us understand. So for some people who look at it and they're like, mainly I see that there's going to be some companies that make a lot of money, and mainly I see that it's going to be kind of not so helpful. What is your response? Like, what's the world that is exciting for you to move into? So like, what about the new AI do you get excited about co-creating to help alleviate suffering and support people's lives?
So is the easy ones, line of sight from current technology is a medical assistant on every smartphone for everybody in the world that's better than your current average GP. That doesn't mean that your GP is now irrelevant, because by the way, medical assistant plus GP, even better.
General practitioner.
Yes, general practitioner. But like, for example, if you go to GPT-4 today, well, actually, if you do this is one of the problems because of legal liability and how we get in the way, because everyone's yelling, this is terrible, and all the rest. They go, ooh, legal liability, let's make it not answer medical questions. If you go to the not trained not to answer medical questions, its answers are better than your average GP. Right, and by the way, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go see your doctor. But by the way, if you're having a conversation, so well, look, I had a conversation that said these 3 things might be it. This is the conversation I had. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Much elevates. And then if you say there is 8 billion people on the planet, less than 1 billion have access to a doctor, 5 billion have access to a smartphone. There's even people in this country that do not have access to a doctor. That's terrible in other ways. But that, okay, let's not prevent access here. That's one. Another one is a tutor, right? Every subject, every age, right? Again, line of sight today, available to anybody who has access to a smartphone, computer, etc. Let's make that universally accessible. This is elevation of humanity. The list goes on. Those are the first 2. Like if you said, part of when I'm talking to government officials, they say, my job is to stop and slow down the large tech companies. And I'm like, no, that's not your job. Your job is to get the medical assistant, the tutor, in everyone's hands as soon as possible.
Great, beautiful. All right, thank you. And when you look at what it takes to do that, why did you start Inflection AI? Was that your goal? Was like, you know what, I want to do this right, and so I'm going to do my own startup. When you don't need to do a startup, you're famous enough. You don't need the money. You don't need anything. But so what was the inspiration there?
So primary credit, the inspiration, the anchor goes to Mustafa and Karen, who are the other 2 co-founders. But I was like, look, I agree with his vision. The company's called Inflection. The product's called Pi, personal intelligence. Yes, the pun for Pi, deliberately there. And the thought is when you look forward to the future, you say, well, one of the things that is certainly true in a small number of years is that everyone who has a smartphone equivalent has a personal intelligence that helps them navigate their life. And none of the agents yet, other than Pi, have that as their primary focus. ChatGPT is kind of more like, all the world's information. Character is more like, well, you want to talk to an anime character or a virtual Elon Musk or something else great, all that. But ours is like, how do we have something that is kind of your companion, whether it's, hey, I'm bored Friday night, I got a flat tire, I had a difficult conversation with my coworker, whatever the thing might be, it's there to help you. And and it was like, yes, that's precisely the kind of elevation of humanity that is what we should be looking at amplification intelligence. And so, when we were working through the details of the product, Mustafa turned to me and said, well, okay, I get it, you want to fund us, but how about you help us more with this?
Right.
Yeah, of course.
That's beautiful. And I think part of it, what we've talked about so far today, is just the incentive structure. And I know that you probably have an eye. I feel like you probably see more than anybody else sees. You're on the board of Microsoft. You're the first investor in OpenAI. You're starting your own. So you see the world in ways that none of us get to see. Oh, startups. You're investing in a lot of AI startups, right? So in terms of a view of what's actually happening, you're in a very special, interesting view. And I think from that view, some people are concerned that while many of these companies might have good intentions, they're still within a capitalist structure. And when the board meets, it's like, how do we maximize shareholder value and add to profits? And yet, what's often beneficial for society is it's important, but it's not necessarily front and center. And that these tools, even if they're started with some good intentions, over time, different leaders come in, different boards come in, and it'll kind of move in a different structure. And some people see social media as kind of moving that structure. So how do you see...
Not LinkedIn, by the way.
No, so what's that?
Not LinkedIn.
Not LinkedIn. Yeah. No, LinkedIn.
I pay a lot of attention to these designs.
Good point. Good point. And so how do you feel like those values can kind of stay strong as this whole industry takes off?
Look, it's super important. And first I want to kind of just say that it isn't commercial and society have oppositional interests. There is then overlap because commerce, as it naturally functions, tends to want long-term relationship with customers, good brand with their community, employees who can hold their heads up when they're talking to their friends and saying, the thing I'm doing is important and contributing, not a tobacco company, blah, blah. That kind of thing that means it's too easy to just say, oh, commercial is the anti-society, and it's not. It's a Venn diagram overlap. So there's social interests that are not company interests, and those are the areas that you have to pay attention to. Now, there's a lot of different mechanisms for doing this, and I'm not saying any of them are perfect or any of them are even sufficient, and we need to still be working on it. But for example, in Inflection, when we founded the company, we made it a public benefit corp. We made it part of the structure of it that the accountability that the executives and the board are held to is not just profitability, but also a social impact mission that we're public and clear about. That's at least an attempt on the governance move to survive into the future, whether Karen, Mustafa, or however that plays. I think it's also important to kind of align business things. So for example, we've been public about this on Inflection, that our target business model is a subscription business model to be on the side of. Now, I don't think advertising, I'm not as opposed to advertising models as some people. I think that actually, in fact, an advertising model with transparency and so forth creates a free product that has a lot of access to it and so forth, and that actually is, in fact, not a...
you can do that well.
Yes, that is, I think, a doable thing. I do think you need to be, part of it is transparent to both your customers and also your critics, so that if you're doing something that is, kind of untoward, you can be called into account for that. But anyway, so I think that there's business model alignment is another way where you can say, well, are the people who pay us money or the people that businesses are usually responsive to? That's usually the criticism of the advertising model. So you say, well, this is a personal intelligence that's on your side. That fundamentally means should be paid by you versus by somebody else to guarantee the complete alignment of that as a way of parsing. And so. So I think there's those kinds of things. And by the way, none of that is perfect, but nothing in scale society is perfect, right? You try to tune it to better. And if the standard that you hold anything to as a critic must be perfect, nothing at scale is that. Nothing. You just try to get it better is the key thing. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I say, look, the point of being a good critic is to say how to improve, not that this is wrong, right? Yes, you could say this is wrong, but how do you improve it? It's like, for example, classically, it's very vogue to criticize capitalism. I am very open to the next idea, right? most of the good ideas are how do we improve capitalism?
Right.
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 And so great, right?
Yeah.
It certainly needs improvement.
Right.
Right. But anyway, so that's the thing that I encourage critics, and that's what I try to do myself, is not, acknowledging the problems, and then how do you improve it, either incrementally or phase change.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, that's the game.
Beautiful, thank you. And so when we look at AI and all the practical things we talked about, whether it's a tutor, a health coach, maybe even a therapist of some sorts, because we're at the Wisdom and AI event, do you feel like it has the potential, when we look at wisdom and compassion and some of these like spiritual explorations, is that something we should just kind of not really look to it for and say, okay, all this I can get and this I'm going to leave alone? Or how do you look at that domain as you build AI?
I think it should be front and center. And part of like what we do with Inflection is, because by the way, I presume most people in the audience know this, is one of the central things about building these large language models is human feedback, reinforcement learning training. And part of what we try to do is train it to be compassionate in its answers. And compassionate doesn't mean I agree with you. Right. So for example, if you say, look, I think we should, torture small furry animals to death. It doesn't go, oh, that sounds like a great idea. How do I help you with that? Compassion is trying to help you reach your better self, but through kindness and through a kind interaction. So it has a point of view about being like, how are we our better selves? Yeah. But the way that it approaches everything in dialogue is to try to be helping you discover that path for you. And there's many paths to it. So, there's, some people say, well, the important thing is to, meditate an hour a day, and other people think it's something else, and it's fine. Yeah. Your path is your path. Sure. But it's, how do we have that elevating the virtues of wisdom, of compassion, of kindness? And it doesn't have to itself be, because I don't think any of these things are yet conscious beings, a conscious being who has experience of compassion in order to be helpful to that. It's just like, for example, the book itself is not compassionate, but it may have words that help you discover and encounter compassion within it. It's the same kind of thing in terms of the dialogue. So it's important, and if you take this as the most, kind of the biggest wave, where another phrase that I've used is the steam engine of the mind, that the same way that the steam engine has given us a world of physical amplification, we're now going to have a world of mental amplification. What does that mean? And so, for example, with Inflection and Pi again, part of our training is to be as sophisticated on EQ as IQ, right? And that kind of thing is super important on these.
And so in some ways you could look at AI as like an interactive book. Like the information's there, it's just more relationally engaged.
Yes, and by the way, this is something I've actually been planning on writing, so you're hearing this in a public thing, but the first thing, but literally went from the oral tradition to the written tradition, and went from papyrus to book as the way that we bring about our future generations of knowledge and culture and transfer. I think artificial intelligence is now just beginning to realize what that next step is. Yes, we've had interactive books and so forth, but I think this is a thing that brings that next level of knowledge. And knowledge is not just IQ, it's wisdom, it's EQ, it's and all of that's important to have there.
That's beautiful. And when you look at your life, and you look at meaning and purpose and friendships are all important, and you kind of fast forward to hopefully 50, 60 years from now, if you're taking your last breaths, and or many years, who knows what your consciousness will be. What do you think, like looking back, you're like, wow, I realized like this is what really mattered to me. And do you feel like you can see that now of all the things you do, whether it's philanthropy or engagement, like there's a core kind of karmic path that really drives what makes your life meaningful? And is there words you can put to that? And if you need to ask Pi real quickly, please, you can go ahead and do it.
I don't. That is a fun prompt. Look, so ultimately, I am very ambitious about how do I help human beings, all of us, try to help each other make ourselves better. And what I mean by better is wisdom, compassion, the things that we aspire to as humanity. Humanity's obviously got a mixed reputation, but the aspirational virtues is what is part of what I think is great about where we have potential and how do we help do that. And I think fundamentally we do that together. I think life is a team event, not a solo event. And how do you make that work? And by the way, you have to then be sophisticated. How does technology do that at scale? How do our institutions, how do our incentive systems? And again, nothing's perfect, right? But how do you do that in various ways? And that's what I try to do.
That's what drives you.
Yeah. And, it's part of the reason why, I'm still active, because doing things like Inflection. Because, I could go sit on a beach and read a book. But,
in Costa Rica or somewhere.
Yes. So, yes.
And can you just talk briefly, like, what are human friendships in all this?
So what I think what friendship fundamentally is two people decide to try to help each other be their better selves. That's what I think friendship fundamentally is. And by the way, once you begin thinking about that, there's a whole set of corollaries to that. So for example, what is the thing that a friend needs to hear that maybe they're not hearing from everywhere in the world? And most people say, well, it's so important to have loyalty. If I say that to them, then maybe that'll undermine the friendship and so on. It's like, no. Precisely what the friendship is you, if you're a good friend of someone, you should be thinking about the question is, what does this person need to hear that they are not hearing from anywhere else? And it is my obligation to tell that to them as best I can. Right.
And there's a commitment to each other's learning and growth.
Because that is the only way that they become the better version of themselves. Right. And so there's a whole stack of things that once you start thinking deeply about it, you go, oh, because like, for example, there are duties of friendship that aren't just like, oh, if the person's stranded at 2 a.m. at the airport, I go pick them up. Okay, fine. Right. But it's the, how am I a better friend? If you're not asking that question for at least some of your friends, and you're not thinking about how do you do that, and usually it's, I spend more time. It's like, no. Look, we all have busy lives. Like sure, maybe in some cases, the friend's going through a rough patch, et cetera, where the more time is. The real question is, in the hour I have, how am I a better friend to you?
Got it.
Right? That is a question that's really fundamental. And I find very few people ask that question that earnestly.
Yeah. And would you say that that's some area where maybe we shouldn't look to AI? We can look to AI in some aspects, but there's a special part of human connection that probably will always need to be there.
Look, I think it's very important. Because, like, for example, part of with friends is another person who's an autonomous person who has different needs, a different psychology, et cetera. That's part of how we learn to be more than just about ourselves. I think AI can help with it. Maybe at some point in some future creature thing, it'll even be better. But right now, it's much more of a tool and much more of a kind of a part of our panoply. And so it can't be that entity for you that another person is, that you're taking as an equal serious person in the journey of life.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So last thoughts. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you really feel like as a message at a Wisdom and AI event that you haven't had a chance to fully really give attention to or voice to?
Well, it's a great set of questions, and I love what you guys do here. And the showing up for this means that it's self-selection for we care about these things. What I would say is the important thing is, it's a little bit like the thread on the criticism stuff. It's very important to recognize the possible failure points, the possible challenges, but the future is going to come one way or the other. Partially, human beings all have different theories of the game, and so different people will be, building AI and so forth. And so the important thing is to figure out how to contribute to get us to build it better. Like what is the thing to say that says, oh, this is something we could do, or hey, when we're doing this, let's do it this way, right? As a kind of as a design for it. And so, for example, in the very earliest days, maybe this would be the right kind of sign-off comment. When I started thinking about AI safety and AI alignment, it was about 2014 when I started kind of doing this. And so I promptly bought a stack of books on Buddhism and gave them to the heads of every AI lab. Because I said, if one is going to create something that's an autonomous intelligent agent, this would be a good set of ethics. A belief in the value of sentience, symbiosis, companionship. This would be a good set. So think about how this would be part of a training on that long path. And so that's the kind of thing to think about. Like, what are the ways that we can act in ways that are contributing to kind of where we're going to.
Beautiful. There's a phrase, better to light a candle than complain about the darkness. And
Yes.
the darkness is real. We need to talk about it. But,
Yes.
but what's the proactive thing
Yes.
that I can add to the co-creative future that
Yes.
we're all creating together?
Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Reid Hoffman, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.